Well, would you look at me? I'm hopping on the tier list trend. I'm really glad we live in an age where content is homogenous as hell and easy to make, so I'm sorry. I just want to stress that with this James Bond tier list, this is my opinion. If you agree, that's pretty cool. If you don't agree, that's perfectly fine. Please don't hurt me. Or maybe you could. I don't care. I'm in a lot of pain. Dr. No. First movie, they get some things right, they get some things not right. They're trying to figure out where they belong in all of this. I'm gonna give it a C tier. I think it's pretty good, the stuff they got right. The stuff that doesn't work clearly doesn't work. It can be slow in parts. I don't go out of my way to watch Dr. No, but you know what? If you like it, you like it. The villain's pretty cool. Dr. No, the guy that the film is named after. They got the iconic line. But besides that, like I said, they're just trying to figure out where they belong and stuff, so it's a C tier. From Russia with Love. This is where I stress that. This is my opinion. I'm giving it an A. I know some people are probably a little upset that I'm not giving it an S, but I've grown. I think it's definitely more mature than Dr. No. I think it's got a lot of great things going for it. Like I said, it's definitely grown on me as a film, but it's my opinion. There's some parts that are a little slow, in my opinion, but this is still a pretty solid watch. Goldfinger. Straight up S tier. This is my favorite film of all time. My favorite film in the franchise. If you, for some reason, put Goldfinger anywhere beneath an S, you are wrong. Thunderball is one where I go back and forth on. I have it currently at a C. I think it's a film people either really love or really hate. I've gone back and forth on my opinion with this one. I think it's got a cool swagger to it. I think it's shot phenomenally well. This is kind of the point where Sean Connery, who is an S-tier Bond, is kind of getting bored with the role, and he's not really big on the fame and stuff. But, I think, there is a cool look and aesthetic to this one. This is probably the coolest one in the Sean Connery films. That said, the plot does get a little convoluted. There's things that they shouldn't really have to show us, but they do. I don't think Largo's the best villain, but I like the stuff with Spectre. I think the underwater stuff is pretty good. I think just because I go back and forth, that's why I'm putting it at a C. You Only Live Twice, that's a B tier. I think this is pretty impressive, the stuff they've done in Japan, in terms of also the production. The volcano layer is absolutely cool. You get to see Blofeld for the first time. I absolutely adore that. The reason I have it at a B tier, yes, there's obviously some stuff that hasn't aged well with this movie. I still think this is a pretty solid film, though. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend it. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, that's an S tier as well. And you know what? If you're gonna give me some George Lazenby hate, get out of here. The dude is obviously wooden. That is his first major acting role, though, so I think he does a really great job for what that kind of situation he put himself in. And the producers as well, but yeah, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, that is an S tier. You humanize James Bond in that situation, and I think it's very well done. Obviously not respected for its time, but it's getting more appraisal as the years go on. That's a definite S tier Bond. I'm forgetting a film. Casino Royale 1967. That is a straight up F tier. If you've seen it, you understand why. This is just a horrible movie. It's not funny. The only way you can get enjoyment out of it is if you're absolutely blasted out of your mind. This is just a bizarre, weird movie. I struggle to get through it every time I watch it. This is a tough one. It's a straight up F. Speaking of Fs, Diamonds Are Forever is an F tier. I don't understand how you can go from On Her Majesty's Secret Service with that kind of ending straight into Diamonds Are Forever and say to yourself, they did that correct. It's baffling, the decisions they make. It's cool to have Connery back in the role, but he looks terrible. I just don't understand a lot of things that go on with it. I mean, I kind of do, because the production was all over the place as well, but this is not how you do a James Bond movie, especially after On Her Majesty's Secret Service. For real, if you haven't had the opportunity to go from that ending straight into Diamonds, it is The only saving grace, in my opinion, with that is Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd. I think they are great henchmen. That said, there are some inappropriate things they do with the character that I'm not big on. And I think while they are the bright side to that whole film, like I said, there are certain decisions I don't like. Live and Let Die, this one might be a little controversial, mostly because I think most people at least agree that it is definitely a stronger Bond, but I know there are some criticisms of it. I'm going to give it an S tier. I know some people definitely have put it an S, but I know sometimes rankings of it have tend to be a little more self-conscious of what goes on specifically in the film, and I know there's definitely problems with it, but I think this is a great adventure, a great way to put Roger Moore into the role as well. Granted, I think his entrance into it in terms of how they present him at first is a little weak, probably the weakest out of all the new Bonds that were starting off, but this is definitely an S tier one. I failed to mention this earlier, but Goldfinger was the first ever Bond film I saw, so that's definitely why it's also in the S tier for me. But the second one that followed up was Live and Let Die, so I also think that's kind of why I have to put it in an S, and I have a hard time, while I obviously understand some of the critiques of the film, I definitely have a hard time not seeing it as an S. But let me know what you think in the comments. And while you're there, if you like and subscribe, that'd be a little cute. The Man with the Golden Gun, I was going to put as an F, but I think the fact that Christopher Lee as Scaramanga and his henchman Nick Nack are probably like the best thing about that movie, and they are so strong in their performance, I'm gonna have to put it as a D. That said, this is the only film where I'm rooting for the villains to win. James Bond is absolutely insufferable throughout this movie, and putting even that aside, Roger Moore, this is probably one of Roger Moore's awkward performance, and yes, I am gonna get into some other films later where he's awkward, but there's a lot of scenes that are uncomfortable with him. There's a lot of dialogue moments that are just plain awkward. There's a whole kind of cheap feel to it, a gritty, in a creep kind of way feel that goes throughout. It feels like a television, like a made-for-TV film. This is just kind of a definite weak follow-up to Live and Let Die, which, keep in mind, was, praised at the time. So I think, while I really, really, really enjoy the villains, I don't think their performances are that strong enough to put it even above a D. The Spy Who Loved Me. I feel like this also might be a little controversial. I'm giving it an A. I know people who would put this as an S, and a lot of people would agree it should be an S tier. As of recently, as an adult, watching through it, and I want to stress this is my opinion, I just kind of don't vibe with it, and I don't know, I agree I'm in the wrong here. I'll probably put it in the S tier. I recognize that it should be an S tier, I just don't know what is wrong with me. Moonraker, let me explain myself. This is a D tier, I'm not putting it as an F. This is kind of where we get into like the enjoyable bad Bond movies. Yes, a lot of this has aged terribly. Is Hugo Drax probably the reason why it's D and not an F? Yeah, most likely. But I have to also agree that I think a lot of the special effects that kind of go on, it's pretty impressive. Granted, some of it can definitely be cheap. And a lot of the humor obviously does not work throughout. Roger Moore's performance as Bond is kind of iffy for me as well. This is kind of the point where we start seeing his age kind of like factor into the role. But I still will watch this and still enjoy it. I know some people who absolutely swear off it because it's Star Wars, but at the same time, like, I think that's what makes it enjoyable. I just can't put it as a C. Maybe one day I will put it as a C, but I know that me putting it as a D and not an F might be controversial, but this is my tier list. For Your Eyes Only, that's an A tier for me. This film has grown a lot for me as while I was growing up. I used to absolutely get bored out of this one, but I absolutely, as an adult, love this one. That said, there are some moments that I think are a little awkward that don't make it absolutely perfect. I think this is Roger Moore's best performance up there with Live and Let Die in terms of the dramatic stuff that goes throughout. I kind of wish Moore did a couple more of these Bond films like this, but I also understand why the producers chose not to do that for him. But I really think this is one of his better, and probably one of his best performances as Bond. Octopussy, please don't hurt me, is a B. And I know people who probably consider this one of the worst Bond films. Yes, kind of like with You Only Live Twice, which is also a B. Maybe that says a lot about me. I think it's pretty enjoyable. I think it's underrated in terms of the plot and the Cold War thrill aspect to it. I don't think it's perfect, though. I think some elements have definitely aged terribly as well, but I think this is pretty solid for what it is given, and there's a lot of cool action scenes. Probably the best one for the Roger Moore era, in my opinion. Oh, we got another unofficial one. Never Say Never Again is a straight up F. This is just disappointing in the fact that I find it to be very boring. I find it to be obviously a dig at the original series. There's obviously like a kind of underlying filth of like hatred going throughout. If you don't know, obviously Kevin McClory, who did Thunderbolt, there's like a whole legal thing you can check out, but I think this is just out of pity and out of a weird legal loophole. But I just find it boring, and I think it could have been really cool what they could have done with a whole other series as like a competition to the original. But it's just kind of disappointing, and I choose rarely to even rewatch it or watch for that matter. A View to a Kill is a D, but it's like one of the enjoyable bad ones. And it really just comes down to, and I hate saying this, Roger Moore's age. He should not be playing James Bond at this point. Him kissing women is cringe in this film. Him usually having a bunch of stunt actors replace him, it's kind of cringe because you can tell it's not him. I think Max Zorin and Mayday are easily some of the best villains. It's just a shame that I really think they should have had a younger Bond. They should have started off with, like, in a weird way, Timothy Dalton at that point, or even Pierce Brosnan. It should have been somebody younger to the point where it wasn't so just weird and, outlandish and cringe. But I think it's like one of the enjoyable bad ones where you can kind of get a laugh out of the fact that a man is aging. The Living Daylights, I'm putting it as a B. I've grown to Timothy Dalton's performance with age, and I think The Living Daylights is a pretty solid entrance for his beginning, because you start to get more serious and stuff, and they still kind of have that humor. My problem is the villains are not great whatsoever. I also think they don't really ease well into the tense version of Timothy Dalton's performance, because I think it becomes more of a problem with the next film I'm going to rank, but I think this is a pretty solid entrance. License to Kill is an A, and this is a film for me that has gone up, and I absolutely love this. The reason I have it at A, and it really has to do with just, I think, to sum it up, I think Timothy Dalton got screwed over. I think he was a fantastic Bond, but I think the producers really didn't help ease audiences into what to expect. And I think it's a shame. I think License to Kill is absolutely phenomenal. It's just the fact that the violence doesn't really gel well with all the other Bond performances up to that point. And while I think it's kind of cool that they went through this tenser, kind of, dramatic way for the character, I just think it might be awkward for audiences. So I'm kind of putting myself as like someone trying to watch all these at that point in time. I think this is, though, still a great film. The tanker chase scene is absolutely iconic and one of my favorite throughout the series. I would put it as an S. I'm just being more cautious of like how an audience might see it. GoldenEye is an S tier. Need I say more? This is absolutely perfect. I think the change in tone and how they like present Bond throughout, this point on forward is absolutely phenomenal. I think it's just such a promising movie, and I absolutely love it. I fail to see how somebody can't put this as like within the top 5 personally, but this is just... With that said, I also think Pierce Brosnan had a really weird tenure as Bond. GoldenEye was such a great movie that I think every film he did afterwards just kind of suffered as a result, and it's kind of a shame. So that's my little disclaimer, because I'm putting Tomorrow Never Dies in C. And the reason I'm doing it is, while I do enjoy the action, I think the switch in how serious and great GoldenEye was to kind of the more action-based, thrills, the stereotypical thrills in Tomorrow Never Dies is just kind of a disappointment. I still think it's a pretty solid movie. I'm just try watching GoldenEye going straight into Tomorrow Never Dies. There's like a kind of a weird, it just doesn't feel, it feels like a stereotypical action film, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of disappointing. I still enjoy it though. The World Is Not Enough is probably my second favorite Pierce Brosnan movie as James Bond. That gets a B tier. And I think what really comes down to it is just, there are some moments where I get a little bored personally still, but I think a lot of what that goes on with The World Is Not Enough is absolutely phenomenal. This is probably within my top 10. Wait, I lied. I'm kind of looking at my tier list and what's left. It's probably not a top 10, but close to it. But I think this is really great. It's just, I think there's some awkward elements throughout. And last but not least, with Pierce Brosnan, Die Another Day. And I'm not putting it as an F, I'm putting it as a D. It's probably more enjoyably bad than A View to a Kill, in my opinion. But I really think there's a lot of strong things going for it. It's just, obviously, there's a lot of weird moments throughout, and a lot of things have aged poorly. Granted, this film is not even 20 years old, if I'm correct. But yeah, it's one of the awkwardly bad, comedically funny, bad movies in the series. And they obviously did the switch up to Casino Royale. Speaking of Casino Royale, I'm giving it an S. That's just a perfect, transition into Daniel Craig's Bond. And I'm going to talk a little more about my feelings on Daniel Craig as Bond, but this is just a really solid movie nonetheless. I think they recovered well with what happened with Die Another Day. I think this is a great way to start off the character. Daniel Craig's performance, at least. This is an S tier. That said, Quantum of Solace, and you're going to notice a pattern, is an F tier. This is just a mess in terms of pacing, editing, storytelling, and it's kind of disappointing to go, that's kind of my feeling with just films leading into the next one, just being disappointed throughout the series, but it's just really disappointing to see them take this turn. But they do save it with Skyfall. Skyfall is an S tier as well. This is the first Bond movie I ever saw in theaters. This is just perfect, and I think the whole relationship with M and James Bond is absolutely perfect in this one. Absolute S tier. That said, Spectre is an F tier. I just don't understand how you can pull a Star Wars on us with the franchise. It's very disappointing that they went through this whole direction with Blofeld and Bond being related. That aside, I'm bored with a lot of things. I think there's awkward decisions made throughout. It's disappointing. Now, do you want to know my thoughts on No Time to Die? No? Well, I'll make a movie one day about it.